Hi, Seagull class. I have a very interesting story for you today. This is a biography on Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who has been named the father of microscopy. You know how when you get interested in something, you just want to learn more about it? You kind of crave information and facts about your topic. Well, this is a story about a man who had that same kind of burning interest in what fascinated him. He became so interested in lenses of magnifying glasses and everything that he could see under them that he just had to learn more. Much, much more. He lived in Holland during the 17th century. He was familiar with lenses and magnifying glasses because he used them in his work. He was an apprentice of a dry goods store, and it was his job to count the threads in the cloth. Look down at your pants. Look how hard it is to see the individual threads in your pants. Can you imagine how hard it was for him to count threads in cloth? He did have a magnifying glass to help him count, but he needed to be able to see as well as he could just to do his work. So he taught himself new ways to grind and polish tiny lenses so that he could magnify the size of the threads. And by grinding and polishing these lenses, he was able to make small lenses with great curvatures. These rounder lenses produce a greater magnification, and he was able to magnify whatever was under his lens 270 times. Well, he was not content to just look at threads with his new powerful lenses. He wanted to look at everything in the world. He was a very curious man, so he began to look at pond water, at blood cells, yeast, animals, algae, minerals, and anything else that he could get his hands on. He was absolutely fascinated by everything that he saw under his lens. Because small insects and fleas were commonly examined under the early magnifiers, they got the name flea glasses. Well, Leeuwenhoek described and reported what he saw very carefully and the best way that he could. He said that some of these things were fashioned like a bell, and some had long, gently moving tails. Some were green, streaks that were spirally wound like a serpent. Some were green globules joined together. He called these minute creatures animalcules. Leeuwenhoek reports having been mightily diverted by watching these tiny creatures move about in so many different ways. We know today that what he really discovered were bacteria, protista, and other microorganisms. Leeuwenhoek was always on the lookout for a new source in order to see more animalcules. Well, one day he was walking down the street and he chanced to meet a man who appeared to have never brushed his teeth. Growing on his teeth was a thin layer of green scum. Leeuwenhoek knew from examining the plaque on his own teeth, which were clean, that there were many animalcules living in his own mouth. So he wondered what he might encounter in that green scum on that man's dirty teeth. Well, the dilemma before him was how to get a sampling of that green growth. He began by introducing himself to the man and telling him that he was looking at the living world under powerful lenses. And then he asked very politely if he could take a swab of the man's teeth just to see what was living there. Well, as might be expected, the man denied Leeuwenhoek's offending request. But Leeuwenhoek was driven, and he would not be deterred. He knew that there was something to learn in that man's mouth. Thus, he made his request again. And again, the man denied the request, but this time more forcefully. Leeuwenhoek then knew that he was not going to get his specimen through cordial conversation. But because he was determined, he knew that he would get his specimen. So understanding this, he readied himself with his swab and his slide, and he tackled the man to the ground and took his specimen by force. Can you imagine doing that? Well, of course the man was outraged and incensed. I certainly would be, wouldn't you? I'm not sure if anything happened to Leeuwenhoek for how he accosted that man, but I do know that he learned something. His description of what he saw in that old man's mouth is this: an unbelievably great company of living animalcules, swimming more nimbly than any I had ever seen up to this time. The biggest sort bent their body into curves in going forwards, and moreover, the other animalcules were in such enormous numbers that all the water seemed to be alive. Well, apparently, what Leeuwenhoek found were bacteria, and these were the first observations of living bacteria ever recorded. It is also a good reminder that we should brush our teeth. So even though Leeuwenhoek was not the first person to build microscopes, he was the first to see and describe all that he found under his lenses. For this achievement, he is called the father of microscopy. I think that we can all agree that when one is passionate about his subject, just as Leeuwenhoek was, through study and investigation, we can all end up making a contribution that would benefit all of humanity. How about you and your passions? What do you think you might discover that will serve society?